Retirement rarely gets stolen all at once. There's no dramatic collapse. There's no single reckless decision that you made. There's no obvious mistakes. Actually, it's slower than that. It's the small mistakes. It's the ones that don't even feel like mistakes. Those are the ones that quietly steal pieces of retirement just over time. It's a postponed conversation, a habit you stop questioning. It's a comfort zone that slowly gets smaller. And by the time most people notice what's missing, they're not even sure when it slipped away from them. So today we're going to talk about 7 slow mistakes that can quietly steal your retirement. Not because you failed, but because no one warned you what to look for. And the earlier you recognize them, the easier they are to correct. So let's get in. Number 1, you're busy but you're not fulfilled. This one catches a lot of smart retirees. Your calendar's full. You've got commitments. You've got projects, obligations, maybe even new responsibilities. And from the outside, it looks productive. But inside, it feels a little hollow. Here's the difference most people miss. Busy fills time. Fulfillment fills you. Retirement drift often starts when activity replaces intention. You say yes because you've always said yes. You stay occupied because slowing down feels unfamiliar. You fill the quiet so you don't have to sit with the question, what do I actually want from this season of my life? Drift doesn't always look like doing nothing. Sometimes it looks like doing everything, except the things that actually matter to you. If your days are full but your energy feels thin, folks, that's not failure. That's a sign you need to steer your ship again. Number 2, you avoid looking at your numbers. Now this one surprises people. Drift isn't always overspending. Sometimes it's just quiet avoidance. You don't check balances as often. You postpone reviewing expenses. You tell yourself, we're probably fine. On the flip side, though, you check obsessively, but never with clarity, only with anxiety. Both are forms of drift. Because when money becomes something that you either ignore or fear, you're no longer staring. Folks, you're reacting. Healthy retirement isn't about staring at spreadsheets. It's about calm awareness. When you know where you stand, decisions get a lot easier. When you avoid it, uncertainty grows in the background. And when uncertainty grows quietly in the background, it starts stealing your confidence. One small decision at a time. Number 3, you keep saying later. This one's really subtle, and it's dangerous. You don't cancel the trip, you postpone it. You don't say no to the hobby, you say, well, maybe next year. You don't avoid the conversation with your spouse. You say, we'll talk about it when things settle down. Drift loves the word later because later feels responsible. Later feels cautious. Later actually feels safe. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In retirement, later can quietly turn into never. Your health changes, energy shifts, confidence declines, circumstances evolve, and the window you thought would always be open starts to narrow. Retirement rarely gets stolen by one reckless choice. It gets stolen by delay, by all the meaningful things that slowly move from soon to someday to never. It steals with delay. If you notice that the meaningful things keep getting pushed out while the routine things stay locked in, folks, that's not time management. That's misalignment. And misalignment left unchecked, it just compounds. Number 4, you've stopped having hard conversations. This one's quieter than most people expect. Retirement changes dynamics. Spouses renegotiate space, roles get shifted, spending habits become more visible. Expectations, they surface, and sometimes, instead of addressing tension, people smooth it over. You avoid talking about money worries, about lifestyle decisions, resentments about who's doing what you actually want these years to look like. And why? Because you don't want conflict. You don't want to rock the boat. You tell yourself, we'll figure this out. But silence is fertile ground for drift. When expectations go unspoken, assumptions take over. And when assumptions take over, distance grows. And distance, emotional or financial, rarely corrects itself. Strong retirements are built on perfect agreement. They're built on honest alignment. If conversations feel harder now than they did before, that's not a red flag. It's a steering signal. Number 5, you don't recognize yourself anymore. This is the quietest drift of all. There's no crisis, no collapse, no dramatic mistake, just a slow shift. You used to feel purposeful, engaged, certain. Now, folks, you feel smaller. You feel more cautious, less decisive, a little disconnected from the version of you that built the life in the first place. And maybe you can't even explain why retirement changes more than schedules. It changes identity. For decades, you were needed. You were relied on. You solved the problems. You carried weight. Then one day that role ends. And if you don't intentionally build a new sense of meaning, something subtle happens. You start shrinking to fit the absence. You stop voicing opinions. You defer decisions. You wait for direction instead of creating it. And that's when retirement starts drifting, not financially, but personally. Here's the truth most people won't even say out loud. Retirement isn't just about managing money. It's about preserving momentum. Because when momentum disappears quietly, so does the version of you that built this life. You're not done. You're not less than by any means. You're not in the waiting room of life, folks. If you feel disconnected from yourself, that's not failure. It's a signal. It's a signal that you need to re-engage, not with busyness, not with comparison, but with intention. Now, these mistakes feel small, but small mistakes compound. But so does realignment. And the moment you decide to steer again, the drift stops. Number 6, you're playing defense instead of offense. This one's subtle also, and it feels responsible. You start thinking mostly in terms of protection. Protect the money. Protect your health. Protect the routine. Protect what you've built. And there's nothing wrong with being careful, but drift happens when protection becomes the only strategy. You stop asking, what could we build? What could we try? What would stretch us just a little? And you only ask, what can go wrong? When retirement becomes pure defensive, it slowly shrinks. The calendar gets safer, the spending gets tighter, the decisions get smaller. And over time, life starts to feel narrower than it needs to be. Strong retirements, they aren't reckless, but they're not timid either. They protect what matters, and they still move forward. If you've noticed that your decisions are mostly about avoiding risk instead of pursuing meaning, folks, that's not wisdom. That might be drift. Number 7, you've stopped imagining what's next. This is the one that sneaks up quietly. Early in retirement, there's anticipation, there's plans, there's possibilities, there's ideas. And then somewhere along the way, imagining slows down. You stop talking about what's next. You stop setting new goals. You stop exploring new versions of yourself, really. You settle into maintenance mode. And maintenance mode, it just feels stable. But it can also feel stagnant. And here's something most people, they don't say. Retirement still needs vision. Not 5-year corporate plans, not hustle, but something that pulls you forward. It's a project, a cause, a relationship. Maybe it's a skill. Maybe it's a place. It's a version of you that hasn't existed yet. And when you stop imagining the future, retirement quietly turns into repetition. And repetition without intention becomes drift. You're not meant to just maintain life, folks. You're meant to engage with it. If you haven't asked yourself in a while, what am I growing towards now? That's not a judgment. That's an invitation. These mistakes, they don't look dangerous at first. That's not what makes them dangerous. It happens because life changes. And if you don't steer intentionally, even calm water can carry you somewhere you didn't mean to go. But here's the encouraging part. The moment you notice it, you're already ahead of it. So let me ask you something. And I really want you to think about this before you answer. Which one of these signs felt closest to home? Was it staying busy but feeling empty? Was it postponing things that matter? Was it avoiding conversations? Or was it that subtle feeling of not quite recognizing yourself anymore? Drop it in the comments. Not because you're admitting failure, but because naming it is often the first step to correcting it. And if you're comfortable sharing, what's one small adjustment you could make this month to steer back towards alignment? Folks, I'd like to thank you for spending some of your time with me here today. And I'll see you in the next video. Y'all take care.